everyone. Welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. And I have the honor of being joined by Sophia Prater. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So, just curious to understand, what is your current role in the UX industry?
My current role in the UX industry, I like to call myself the chief evangelist for object-oriented UX. I am a UX designer, actually do UX design, but I also do a lot of teaching and a lot of evangelizing for what I like to call object-oriented UX. I am also the founder and lead facilitator of the OOUX certification program. I also created the OOUX masterclass and lots of other learning materials just to get the word about object-oriented UX out there. I also write a lot too.
Yeah, and I've stumbled upon your work, been introduced to it by various members of this UX industry, and I've become a fan of it. The question for me, though, is that I always find interesting is, well, how did you end up stumbling into this whole thing called user experience?
Yeah, so it's actually a really a fun story. Which I don't actually tell a lot. I often tell the story of getting into uh, modular design and responsive design with my work with CNN. So maybe we'll get into that story. But actually, how I got into UX design is a funny story. So that goes way back to about 2008, end of 2008, where I was living in my parents' basement, of course. I had recently graduated from industrial design school, and during that recession, nobody wanted to hire industrial designers. So there was a lot of there was a lot of not hiring going on during that time. And I had to I was in a lot of student debt. I had to move back in with my parents, like just a cliche of failure. I was working at Outback Steakhouse for longer than I would like to admit. And I was just applying to industrial design jobs. That was my degree, was industrial design. So I was applying to industrial design jobs. I didn't know what UX was. Actually, nobody really knew what UX was. Around that time. I mean, I guess some people did, but it's pretty telling that the role that I ended up getting with Accenture was for a UE analyst. They were calling it UE at that point. But I got that role through a friend of a friend who was a recruiter at Accenture. And I met her at a party. And I think recruiters can kind of smell smart unemployed people from from a mile away. And yeah, so I got to talking with her, and I remember coming back to my parents' basement and kicking up the email and seeing an email from her with a job role for this UE analyst at Accenture, and just thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds perfect, because all the work that I had done in industrial design, my senior thesis was a cell phone interface. When I worked as I was an intern with Electrolux, doing large home appliances, and all I cared about was how do the buttons work on the appliances, or like how are you going to fit ice cream and pizza in this freezer? Like, so I was like much more interested in that rather than like making the product sexy, or thinking about the materials, or even thinking about the manufacturing. I was really concerned with the experience of the different products. So it really just made a whole lot of sense. I applied, I actually got the job, and that just was a really good time to get into UX. I kind of got in before the big wave of, the iPhone I don't even think the iPhone had come out. Yeah, so it was a really good time to get in.
That's amazing. So from Outback to the fronts of of design. And it is amazing how I was thinking about this, because I actually, for a short term there, I worked at an art school, and they had a very large industrial design curriculum. And I always thought there was a connection there, between understanding who the user is, how to do that. And
Mhm.
that's great. It's a great story of how you took that learning, turned it into another career. And that's the one question we get a lot, is those that are looking to get into this space. They're looking for some advice, but they're also wondering, you know, who am I going to stack up against? It seems like it's a very large, everyone's interested in getting into this field. Why do you
Mhm.
think everyone's so interested in getting into this user experience field now?
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say before I actually answer your question is to anybody who's feeling like the market is really saturated. I will paraphrase probably my most popular tweet ever, which I do not have a large presence on Twitter at all. So, but this is the one that I remember being like, oh, wow, people that really resonated with people. And I stand behind this still, is anybody that's feeling like that the market is really saturated. I mean, I'll ask you, Mark, how many times have you been annoyed with technology today?
How many times can I count? I've
Yeah.
probably got a marker on my wall.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I've been annoyed by technology at least 17 or 18 times today, maybe more than that. And it's not even 1 p.m. yet. So we are failing at this. We are absolutely, the people that are in UX, all the people that are doing product design, all the people, there's so many reasons, but I think that we are failing humanity. I think that technology still sucks. So we need you. We need your cousin. Anybody that is interested in this, come on in. It might be a little bit tougher than it was a few years ago, like when it was in 2008, when Accenture was just really hiring anybody with a degree and a little bit of intelligence to go and do. I think it was relatively easy for me to get into it, even at that tough time during a recession, because it was really, really open. Nobody was doing that work. Now it is more saturated, but we are still failing. The people that are in this, I think that we've got a lot of work to do, and we need bright new minds to come in here and help us out, because technology still sucks. It's just gonna, I mean, I don't want to be a doomsayer or anything, but basically engineering is moving faster than design. So new technologies are coming out so much faster than we're able to keep up in the design industry. And there's a lot stacked up against us when it comes to actually getting the work that we produce put into production. As a UX designer, there's a lot of blockers there, and I acknowledge that. But I do think that anybody that is feeling like it's too saturated or there's not space for you, we are all still pioneers. I'm going to get off my soapbox in just a second and actually answer your question. But we are all still pioneers. This is very, very new. So don't feel like you're getting in late in the game. We are just getting started with this. So the reason that I think that people want to get into it is because how much fun does this work sound, right? I mean, you're working in technology, but you've got this great intersection between creativity and science and psychology and technology. So anybody that is really kind of like, I feel like it's a really great space for that sort of Renaissance person that's interested in a lot of things, that's curious about people, that's curious about technology, really, and wants to solve problems and wants to solve big problems. And so for anybody that has that level of curiosity, this is a really good place for them. I would say, theoretically. But unfortunately, a lot of UX designers are really unhappy. A lot of UX designers, a lot of those first roles are not what you think that they're going to be. Again, like I feel like I'm like maybe in like a doomsayer mood or something right now, but like the first couple roles that I was in, I would come home crying a lot because it seems so fun. It seems like it's really fun. And then you get in there and you are thwarted right and left by timelines that don't make any sense, by feature requests that are not backed by research. It can be a very difficult environment to thrive in. The way that we are right now. I think things are getting way better, but still I talk to so many UX designers and there's a lot of frustration in our field. So for those that are excited about coming in and to my first point, like, yes, please come in. We need you. We need you, we need you, but set your expectations. Yes, it can be really fun, but this is also a very new field that is still figuring itself out and still figuring out how to like get a seat at the table, and to get this work done correctly, get this work done in a way where we have enough time, we have enough space, and we're not just kind of moving UI around without all the information we need. I think a lot of UX designers end up getting really frustrated by the amount of guesswork that they have to do.
I agree with you. It's fun, but there still is a structure. You still have to work within the business parameters. Those expectations are key. And I know there's been a lot of research about that as well, is how you can come in with expectations that are here, and then eventually you match those up. And then that's where that unhappiness level can occur. My
Yeah.
question that I think about a lot is, so you talked about OOUX and how you've been working to procure that methodology into the world. How does that factor into the future of UX? Because that's where, as you talked about, everyone's getting into it, but the reality is technologies, they are increasing every day. There's a new technology.
Yeah.
UX philosophy is being applied to that, but where do you see it going in the future? And then how does OOUX fit into that?
Yeah. Well, to segue into what I was just saying, I think that OOUX, I hope, is a part of the solution to everything I was just talking about, to a part of the solution to have so much less frustration, because that's what it was for me. I was being years into my very very first job as a UX designer. I was dropped into the world of business to business insurance design. And I barely understood my own insurance, much less business to business, B2B insurance, not exactly uncomplicated, right? I was dropped in and I was given a bunch of information, and I am all about, to your last point, I am all about designing within business constraints into business requirements, but we need to understand those business constraints and business requirements. And often we are not given time or space or even expectation to do so. Can you just add some UX to these screens that the PM designed? And can we have them by Friday? Right? We're going to do a first review on Friday. And you need that much time just to really understand the problem domain, understand what's actually going on. What are those business constraints? What are those technology constraints? What kind of playing field am I actually designing on? And so I was very, very frustrated for the first few years of my career, because I was time and time again dropped into these scenarios that were incredibly complicated. I was expected to kind of ignore that complexity, just sort of brush that under the rug. You don't really need to know that. Just kind of like, can you sort of just UX these screens here? And so I was skate along the surface of design. I wasn't really able to like create the intrinsic change and the systemic change that I wanted to make in these products, because I didn't have time. You can't get into information architecture in a few days. You can rearrange the UI and throw some UX best practices on top of it, and maybe like take a little bit of research in to add a bit here and there, but you're not going to really change any systemic structure in the system. So basically, I developed the process to be able to do that really quickly within those constraints. So to really quickly, within just a few days, instead of weeks or months, to be able to understand those business constraints, to understand how the business actually works. How does a problem domain work? How do medical records work? Oh, you need to design something for medical records. How do electronic medical records work? How does a recent client, how does engineering and manufacturing work with 3D modeling? Like, how does that work? If I'm going to design screens for somebody that is in this tool for 8 hours a day, I'm not going to be able to just go jump straight into screens. And that's what we're asked to do over and over again, is to just jump straight into screens without understanding. So I basically had to build a tool for understanding. And that's what this process is, the ORCA process, which is just objects, relationships, calls to action, and attributes. What are the things? How do those things relate to each other? What do people want to do to those things? And what are the attributes of those things? What is the structure of those things? And going through those 4 questions, I at increasing levels of fidelity, we actually have about 4 rounds in the process of going through those questions, is a great way to just understand. So the way that I see the future is hopefully this process and this way of thinking, whether it's, I hope it's my process. I think my process is great, but any kind of just recognition that UX designers, we need to understand before we design. We're often told to just go straight into design without giving space for understanding, and we often don't even ask for the space to understand. So we really need to have, if you think about the double diamond, we're like, I feel like we're really strong in research. We're doing better in there. And we could probably be doing even more with research. We're really good on that second diamond of design, of actually, building beautiful UI. Design systems are just, I think it's so great how much design systems have taken off. We're getting much more mature there when it comes to design. Both of these diamonds, I think that there's a third diamond that we're missing. And that's the diamond in the middle of synthesis or structure, of being able to take that research, take all those business constraints and turn them into structure that the design can hang on. And so I think the future design, what I hope is the future design is that third diamond, like a triple diamond process, where we take research in, and sometimes through that third diamond, we get spit back to research, because we realize that we don't know enough. Often we don't know what we don't know. So we just go into design. There needs to kind of be a gauntlet between those. And the ORCA process works really, really well for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the future is bright. We have new thought process that's being injected into it. And for everyone that would like to follow more information about what you're doing, where do they go?
Sure. We've got OOUX.com. You can go to OOUX.com/resources or /training. So there's all sorts of goodies there, lots and lots of free resources there, as well as if you're interested in the masterclass, that is a 22-hour online course, or the certification, OOUX.com/masterclass, OOUX.com/certification. Pretty easy to find all the goodies there once you are there. And you can follow me on Twitter, Sophia V UX. That's Sophia V as in Victor, UX. That's me on Twitter, and I'm available on LinkedIn too. Also easy to find on LinkedIn.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your pearls of wisdom here. And for all those, once again, please follow up with Sophia, find out more about what she's doing. And thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark. It was really fun. And also, I want to offer your listeners a discount code if somebody does want to do the OOUX Masterclass. Go ahead and check out with UX Pathways in all caps, and we'll give you $100 off. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.